Why do you want to work out? What is your goal? The most important thing is that you have a vision, that you have a goal. Because without that vision and without that goal, again, you're drifting around and you're never going to end up anywhere. People don't become successful just by accident. Maybe the guy that found gold in California and started the gold rush, but don't count on that. That's a one in a lifetime kind of a situation. So you got to really have a specific goal, and to me, to have that vision that I want to be Mr. Universe.
What's up, my dudes? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about how to run the perfect contest prep. Well, in fact, I'm actually going to be telling you about how I've run my contest prep and detailing everything from my nutritional approach, cardio, training, PED deployment from the start to the very end, now sitting at exactly 7 days out from the show. So whether it's a perfect contest prep or not, I guess will yet to be determined by the results next week. But I'm pretty confident in terms of where we're standing. So this is going to be quite a detail-oriented video. I officially started contest prep round about the 7th of January this year. This was coming off essentially a transition phase where my calories had been dropped to just about 3,200 per day. I was doing no formal cardio and was only on 10,000 steps per day. That was achieved primarily just, neat walking around during the course of the day and walking my big old boy flex outside. Once we started contest prep, things transitioned pretty aggressively, and the goal from the beginning was to get ready early. I think that's always the approach with the contest prep. If you are digging in the last 2 weeks to get ready and to get lean enough, you're probably not allowing yourself enough room and enough bandwidth to play around with variables that are going to allow you to peak adequately and come in full and with low fatigue to the stage, which is really, really important. So we got aggressive from the onset, essentially bringing my calories down from that 3,400 mark by 500 to about 2,900 calories per day. My macros were set at 255 grams of protein, round about 390 grams of carbs, and 40 grams of fat. And I initiated a small amount of formal cardio, 20 minutes, 5 days a week. At that particular point in time, during my transition phase, just before we started the prep, I was on a baseline of 150 milligrams of test and 150 milligrams of DHT. We chose to go with Masteron as my DHT derivative, mainly just because the dosing is a lot easier. With Primobolan, because it is 100 milligrams per mil, as that dosage escalates throughout the course of your contest prep, dosing can become a bit of a challenge, and injection frequency has to go up substantially, which I'm not a huge fan of. And I do find, just from my own subjective experience, that Masteron does have some benefits and carry over in terms of really retaining performance in the gym at a very high level for long periods of time, which is incredibly important during a prep, because obviously your performance in the gym is going to have a lot of carryover in terms of your ability to retain lean muscle tissue. Fast forward to the next big change that we made. I basically started this prep at roundabout, and excuse for my South African subscribers, I'm going to be talking in pounds here. Started off at 213 pounds. I think my peak off-season weight was about 219. So over that transition phase, I'd come down about 5 pounds. The next big change we made was roughly 4 weeks into the future. So sitting beginning of Feb, we dropped my calories down to about 2,600 on training days, 2,300 on rest days. So that was the first time that we initiated kind of a carb cycling approach with a slight differentiation between training and rest days. My steps had moved up by this point to averaging around about 13,000 per day, and I was on 35 minutes of cardio 6 days a week. Now, this is where I really hit my stride. You can see that, or you can't see, but I'm telling you that mid-January I was sitting at about 212 pounds. Within 1, 2, 3, 5 weeks, I was down to 202 pounds. So I essentially was losing 1% of my body weight per week. And honestly, guys, at this stage, I was cruising. If I look at the biofeedback data that I was providing my coach, my hunger levels were low, my mood rating was high, my energy was high, my sleep was averaging around 7.5 hours per night, and I was feeling good and ticking along really, really nicely. At this point, roughly around the beginning of Feb, we had escalated my dosages up to 250 milligrams of test and 800 milligrams of the DHT derivative. There were absolutely no other compounds in place as of yet, apart from metformin, aka glucophage, and telmisartan, which are more just health supplements. Alrighty, so move along a couple of weeks, and I can see that I was cruising here. At round about mid-March, I hit sub 200 pounds, and often these little markers in terms of body weight progression can yield quite a big shift in terms of how you're feeling. What I knew is that my previous stage weight had been around about 180, 181 pounds, but I'd also anticipated that I'd put on a good 5 to 6 pounds of lean muscle. So this is where I knew that I was going to have to start digging pretty hard. Calories came down to about 21 to 2200 per day. At this point, my step count was averaging about 15,000 per day with 45 minutes of cardio 6 days a week. Now, because the predominant amount of my cardio is done on the treadmill, from the beginning, we counted the steps that I was accruing from formal cardio into the step count. If you're doing a form of cardio like the bike or the elliptical that may not track all those steps, you may want to keep those two metrics entirely separate. And this is exactly the point. So mid-March, I can remember going to the Nora and Pure concert when they came here, and I was feeling really, really good. And roughly the week after that concert, things started taking a turn for the worst. So I can see my hunger and appetite was escalating pretty damn rapidly. I can see this is where my sleep started getting impacted fairly consistently. I was averaging by this point only about 6 hours per night. And this is also kind of where progress started escalating even more rapidly. So from the 11th of March sitting at 198.6, by a week later, or about a week and a half later, I was down to 192.7. So at this point, I knew that I was kind of within 8 to 10 pounds of my stage weight. And this is kind of where I had never truly had this experience in a contest prep before. I think with all the coaches that I have worked with, they've been fairly conservative when taking into account subjective experience. So when you're indicating, hey, listen, I'm feeling really tired, I'm feeling really hungry, I'm struggling to get through this. I have had coaches in the past that have pulled back, given diet breaks, deloads, etc., etc. This was a different experience in the sense that, and I very much appreciate this, and I think it is pertinent to high-level athletes, or at least commensurate with what the athlete on hand wants to achieve, is that Luke was looking a lot more at the objective data and basically saying, hey, listen, I know that you feel like crap, but the reality is that you are progressing and that you're moving forward and that your body is responding. And if we see that your body is responding, we have to leverage that momentum as much as possible. So at this point where I was about 192 pounds, calories were now sitting sub 2,000 per day. So training days were just around about 1,900. Rest days were sitting at 1,500. My protein levels had obviously maintained from the beginning of prep. Carbohydrates were down to 200 on training days and about 160 on rest days. And this is the first time that I've ever done a prep where my fats have been below 30 grams for extended periods of time. And this is one of these things that you constantly hear about, fats can't go below 40 grams. That is not the case. When we're looking at a contest prep or even a fat loss phase, for somebody that wants to, approach their fat loss phase in an aggressive manner to get the best results possible. 25, 30 grams of fat are going to cover your bases as far as hormone production, as far as fat-soluble vitamin absorption, as far as gallstone prevention, etc., as long as it is only done over an acute period of time. So by this point, my fats had dropped below 30 grams, and they have pretty much retained there until this point. And this was in April, early April, and we're now sitting pretty much at the end of June. One thing that we also have to remember is that with the implementation of exogenous hormones, we have a lot more leeway to play with that fat intake. And because fat is the most calorically dense macronutrient, it is the one that is most viable to be pulling calories from. Beginning of April, calories were down sub 2,000. Cardio had retained at 45 minutes, but I had pushed up my step count to averaging just about 16,000 per day. I can see, and if you've watched some of my other vlogs, you'll notice this is where I started pulling back very significantly on my caffeine intake. Fatigue was really, really high. My sleep was suffering quite badly. And I started having some GI issues that we essentially reduced down to my level of caffeine intake, which at that stage was about 500 milligrams a day. We reduced it down to 200 milligrams a day. I changed my Hellfire Black for the Hellfire Pump, which is stimulant-free, and cut down my energy drink intake to 1.5 monsters per day, essentially. Fast forward another few weeks where we're sitting now at the beginning of May, and I was essentially down to 180 pounds flat. And then a few days later down to 177, which is the low point that I had during this prep. So this was an interesting one because this was essentially 6-7 weeks out from the show, and I had hit a body weight that was below my previous stage weight. All right. Now, this is where I felt my absolute worst, but where I got really, really excited, because I knew that if we had 6 to 7 weeks to work and I was already at a level of conditioning superior to where I was on stage at my last show, I knew that we were going to be able to do something pretty special here in terms of the package that I brought to stage. And this is ultimately the intention of starting early. People are in this mindset that a contest, I don't know where people get this number, that a contest prep is 12 weeks or 14 weeks or 16 weeks long. Everybody is going to have a different starting point, and everybody is going to have a different rate of loss. This is why I don't like starting a prep with a new client. I love to have some time and experience of taking them through an improvement phase, a couple of mini cuts, etc., to gather that data in terms of how they're going to be responding to a deficit, to a surplus, how easily they're going to be fatigued, how often they need diet breaks, how often they need high days versus low days, etc., and really the mental fortitude that they have to push through these difficult stages. So at this point, it was kind of early May. I can see that my sleep had deteriorated to a point where I was getting about 4.5 to 5 hours per night. Now, this is pretty normal. When you are very, very lean, two things tend to happen. Number one, you wake up frequently during the night to urinate because you're just eliminating a lot of water all the time. And secondarily, you're waking up with hunger pangs because your body is saying, don't sleep, go find food because you're about to die. And both of these things were happening to me. However, we did not increase my calories at all. We were hanging around 1,400 per day. So essentially, we were running 7 consecutive low days at 240 grams of protein, 80 grams of carbs, and 24 grams of fat. I implemented 5-HTP to help with some mood regulation, sleep, and some of the issues surrounding food cravings. At this stage, I also implemented magnesium bisglycinate and slow-release melatonin to at least assist with the quality of my sleep, which it surely did. Even though the duration hasn't improved even up until this point, the quality has improved. So I'm waking up, even with a short duration of sleep, feeling a lot more refreshed. So that was a low point. That was about 177. Thereafter, what we did is initiated the use of some fairly new and significant compounds. Because it was low body weight and also kind of where I was feeling my worst, this is where I started to see some attenuations to my training performance. So by this point in time, we were sitting at 275 milligrams of testosterone, about 1.3 grams of my DHT derivative. Now, at this point, I did split this between 1,000 milligrams of Masteron and 300 milligrams of Primobolan. And we did also implement 150 milligrams per week of tren acetate. Now, we only kept this in for about 4 weeks because this further reduced my ability to sleep and get a restful night. It also elicited quite a lot of anxiety on a daily basis, so you guys understand the main function of tren during a contest prep, and it has zero application whatsoever in an off-season context, is this interaction with the glucocorticoid receptor, whereby it is going to prevent those drop-offs in training performance, and you are going to be able to maintain and sometimes even build on your performance levels, despite the fact that you are objectively and subjectively very fatigued and very run down. However, the conversation that I had with Luke was that the compromise on my sleep was just not worth the benefits that I was getting from training. So what we then did was take out the tren and we replaced that with about 20 milligrams of Anavar per day. Now, I usually wouldn't be implementing Anavar this far out, or any oral this far out, because I think the shorter your exposure to any oral anabolics, the better in terms of liver health and therefore kidney health. But training was taking a bit of a dive, so we thought this was necessary, and 20 milligrams in context is a fairly low dosage. So because of the implementation of these new compounds, and this is where prep can get really weird, and you need to stop paying attention to what your scale weight says, because at this point, it is just not going to be a reflection of where you are and how you're progressing over that period of time. So I hit a low of 177.8 on the 7th of May. By a week and a half later, on the 11th of May, I was back up to 183 pounds. So I'd essentially gained 5 pounds, which is almost 2.5 kilograms in a week and a half. I think if anyone were to hear that during their prep, they would be very worried about why am I eating sub 1,500 calories per day and my weight is going up. But with the introduction of these compounds, you need to understand that there are going to be large fluctuations in body water. It is going to allow you to store more intramuscular glycogen and intramuscular water and get your performance levels up in the gym. So this is really where you're sitting at that kind of 6-week out mark, that you need to stop paying attention to what's happening on the scale and really just primarily focus on the visuals and are those visual improvements coming in. And then fast forward to really about 2-3 weeks ago, where Luke and I both felt that I was pretty much at a point of conditioning of being ready for the show, and we could start playing around with where my carbohydrate tolerance was at and how we were actually going to peak for the show. So since I would say end of May, early June, we've been running a push-pull way of doing things. At times, certain weeks have been 5 low days and 2 high days. At some times, we've run 5 back-to-back high days, depending on how my body responds. But right now, and pretty much since the beginning of June, my lowest days are at 120 carb and 23 grams of fat. My highest days have been as high as 500 grams of carbs and 30 grams of fat. Those have been very irregular. And generally what we found out is that I look my absolute best 2 days after those very high carb days. So fast forward to now, I'm essentially coming off, today will be my 5th consecutive high carb day. I woke up this morning sub 180 pounds, which is really, really interesting. And the question would be like, well, you've been feeding up, why are you dropping weight? And this is one of the things that we're really trying to do. If you get ready early and you are lean enough early on, one of the things that you can do is feed into the show. People think that peak week is about dehydrating yourself and fatiguing yourself and, running depletion workouts. That is not the case at all. If you do things correctly, you can have 7, 10, 12 days where really the primary aim, first and foremost, is to drop fatigue. So since about 2 weeks ago, formal cardio has been taken out. I've only been doing steps. My steps are averaging somewhere around 13 to 14,000 a day, which is really easy for me to get in. It's low intensity. It's just walking around my estate, walking my dog, and just what I accrue through the day. And then basically pushing these carbohydrates up to find a body weight that is reflective of my best look. So what we found over the last few days is that somewhere between 181 and 183 pounds is kind of my best look. But we don't want to be waking up on show day with my best look. We want to be feeding into, because I'm going to be competing in the afternoon, probably around about 4 or 5 p.m. So we want to be approaching that weight by controlling my food intake, my fluid intake, my sodium intake throughout the day, so that by the time I get on stage, I'm presenting that best look. So we're kind of now refining, where do I need to wake up? Somewhere around 179, 180. And then how do I make sure that by 4 or 5 p.m. in the day, I present that best look, which can be reflective of a certain weight on the scale. So that's where we are now. The next week is yet to be determined in terms of how we're going to run things. As any of my clients will know, peak week is a very sensitive time, and things can be changing drastically on a daily basis. You can have a situation where you give somebody a 200-gram increase in carbohydrates and they drop 1.5 kilograms overnight. So I'm going to be checking in not only once a day, but 3 times a day. It's going to be first thing in the morning, post-workout, and before bed at night. And that daily strategy is going to be refined day by day, hour by hour, as we move along in the process. So one thing that I do very much want to say is that this has been my most effective contest prep that I've ever run. I've never been this conditioned at this point. I've never been fuller at this point. However, this has definitively been the hardest prep of my life. Now, whether that was the prep itself or the context surrounding it, considering that in the midst of doing all this, business has never been busier. A lot of new clients, a lot of clients competing. So that certainly factors into it. And when you're starting out a contest prep, you do have to consider, are you at a good point in life to be taking away so much time from all the other stuff that you have going on? Are you in a good place to be focusing on this one sole goal, which might take a lot out of you? But even a week from the show, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing what the results are going to be, I am very happy and proud of myself that I've been able to get through this, because I said from the beginning that I was doing this show and doing this prep not to win or to turn pro, but just to set an example for my athletes and my clients in terms of how to run their prep, the attitude that they need to display, the way that they need to conduct themselves in public and around the people that they care about. And I feel like I have managed to do that within the confines of a prep that has been explicitly debilitating at points. So I'm really happy and really proud of how I'm done. And whatever happens next week, it has been a great growing experience, and most importantly, a great learning experience, which is another one of the reasons why I continue to compete myself, purely to gain that experience and gain that knowledge, working with different coaches, which then I can apply to my clients in my practice. All right, guys, if you like videos like this, where I'm a little bit more data focused, taking you through what I've done, taking you through what my clients have done, please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. There will be a lot more content like this coming very soon. The next one will hopefully be running you through Amanda's prep. She just won the overall figure title at the NPC Eye Candy Classic and is on her way to the pro qualifier at the end of the year.